Good morning, Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov. Today we begin the second Seder Mishnah, Seder Moed. Yesterday we made the Siyum and Seder Zoram in my home. Thank you to all that came, and thank you to all who have been following this journey since we started this back in Elul. Today we're starting Shabbos. Today's shir is sponsored Lila Nishmas. Aaron Nachman ben Simcha Cohen, Yeshua Mordechai ben Shep, Slabrach, Sarah Shmuel Leib, and Miriam Moshe ben Yosef, may the Hashem will have an aliyah. It's also a schus for Victor Aaron ben Gittel Masha, for him and his constant mishpacha. This Shefer Bracha V'Atzlacha. And is sponsored by the Blackbird Recruiting Group for the second week of Kislev. Kislev, we're still on Kislev. The second week of Kislev is sponsored by the Blackbird Recruiting Group. Thank you, Shefer Bracha V'Atzlacha, in all your endeavors. Now let's go. Okay, so Seder Moed starts over Shabbos. Shabbos, we know, is one of the cornerstones of Yiddishkeit. So it dedicates 24 chapters of Mishnayos, talk about the 39 malachas of Shabbos and all their related inyanim. So we start off with Mishnah Aleph, talking about Hotzah. What is Hotzah? Hotzah is transferring something from a public domain, from one domain to another domain. Whether you go now, there are four domains in halacha. Now, once again, let's remind ourselves: Mishnayos is not the final psak halacha. So even though we're learning about halacha Shabbos, do not rely on this for a psak halacha. I am not a posek. I am just giving a share of Mishnayos. Always consult with your local Orthodox rabbanim about the halacha l'maisa in any case. Do not rely on Mishnayos as the halacha. Okay, that disclaimer. There are four types of domains when it comes to Hilchos Shabbos. You have Rishus HaYachid, which is the private domain, Rishus HaRabim, which is the public domain, a Carmelis is in between. We'll get to that soon, and a Makom Patur, which is it's like totally putter. Anyways, so we're starting off today. Mishnah Perek Aleph, Mishnah Aleph. Yitzie as Shabbos Shtayim Shehein Arba B'Fnim, V'Shtayim Shehein Arba B'Chutz. It is usher to move an object on Shabbos from a private domain to a public domain, or vice versa, from a public domain to a private domain. That's called the halacha of the malacha of Hotzah. Hotzah is actually the last of the 39 malachos, and yet the Mishnayos start with Hotzah, start the Masechta with Hotzah. That's an example of last in, first out. It was the last one on the list, and we're doing the first one first. We would do the last one first. Anyway, so Mishnah starts with that there are two types of forbidden transfers that are asur in Torah. Yet Chazal, the Rabbanim, they added two more to make it a total of four. Right? There's two deraisa, two derabanan. In the case of someone standing inside a private domain, and the same thing, there are two deraisa types of transfer that are asur in the Torah, and the Rabbanan added on two more of arba b'chutz, so the total of four when it comes to the person standing outside. So it's a total of really four deraisas and eight altogether, including the derabbanans. We're going to get into the two types of transfers that are deraisa based. Kate said, how is this? So ha'ani ha'omei b'chutz b'bala bayis. So the first case is where a poor man is standing outside in the street in a public domain, and the homeowner is standing inside his house, which is a private domain. Which is a yachid. Pashat ha'ani is yado l'fnim, v'nasa l'sos yado shababais. If the poor man who who is holding an object in his hand and he puts his hand into the house, into the doorway, into the window, and puts the object in his hand into the homeowner's hand while the homeowner's in his house. Oh, that's one. Oh, shenata misocha v'hotzi. Or the poor person took an object, a loaf of bread or something from the homeowner's hand and took it out of the house. So he reached in, his hand was empty. He reached in, he picked up the item, and he pulled his hand out the window and took it outside the house. Ha'ani chayiv bal habayis. But in both of these cases, the poor man is chayiv for having committed a issa d'oraisa in both cases, and the balabas is pater because the ani did all the action over here. Second case, okay, pasha bal habayis is yadol chutz nasal sochi yadol. If the homeowner he's standing in his house, he holds an object in his hand, and he extends his hand out of the window, out of the door, outside the house, and puts the object into the poor person's hand. So the Balabas is doing all the action. Oh, shenata misocha v'hechnis, or if the homeowner took the object from the poor man's hand and brought it into the house. So again, the Balabas is doing all the action himself. Balabas chayiv ani potter. Then the Balabas is chayiv because he did all the action, and the poor man is potter because he just received it, was dropped in his hand, he didn't do anything wrong. Okay, all those four cases are all d'oraisa, and now the Mishnah is going to explain the d'rabbanans. Pasha ha'ani is yado lifnim v'nato bal habayis misocha. If the poor man who is holding an object in his hand and extends his hand into the house, okay, so far the poor man took all the action. He has the item, puts it into the house, and then the homeowner took the object from his hand. Instead of the ani placing the object into the homeowner's hand, the homeowner actually made an action and took the object from his hand. Or case number 6, the homeowner put the object into the poor man's hand, and the poor man took his hand out. Okay, so there was an action on the part of both people. Shnei and Petur, they are both pater when it comes to this law, to the Torah law, but they both pater d'oraisa, but they are chayav d'rabbanan. That they're chayav d'rabbanan because since they did not fully complete the transfer, then they're not chayiv this d'oraisa. But since they did a part of it, they each did a part of it, then they're chayav d'rabbanan, even though d'oraisa they are fine. And cases 7 and 8, pasha bal habayis is yado l'chutz v'nato ha'ani misocha. If the homeowner was holding an object in his hand and he extended his hand out of the house and the poor man took it from him, or shenas l'socha v'hiknis, or if the poor man put the object in the homeowner's in his extended hand, and the homeowner withdrew his hand, brought the object into the house, shnei b'turim, they're both pater at the d'oraisa level, but they're chayiv according to the d'rabbanans. Okay, Mishnah Beis has nothing to do with Shabbos. It's sidetracking to this mincha for on a regular day. Lo Mishnah Beis lo yeshiv adam lifnei hasfar samach lemincha ad shiyispalo. Person should not sit down in front of a barber that have his haircut near the time of mincha, right? Until he has daven mincha. Lo lo yikanes adon lemerchatz lo lebruski lo lechol Similarly, a person should not enter a bathhouse. Back in the day, they went to a bathhouse. They didn't have like running water inside their homes, or a tannery where it's very stinky, or eat a meal, or serve as a judge until he died as mincha. But if they had already begun any of these activities, if they started it before this man mincha, then they do not need to interrupt to daven. Rather, they can finish and then daven afterwards. Mafsikim nikras kriyashma. We do interrupt these activities in order to recite Shema when the time for Shema arrives, but we do not interrupt them for prayer. And then, okay, so let's go through a couple things over here. First of all, it, it's not the interruption for prayer. That's when you're holding at the level of Rishon Bar Yochai, who's mamish learning Torah 24/7, and he did not need to stop for prayer. But I think even when he was in the cave, we were told that they got out of they buried themselves in the sand until it was time for tefillah, and then they got out and they went back in to learn. But also, I was looking at this Mishnah today, and I was like, it's fascinating because really this Mishnah should belong in Seder Zerayim with by brachos, because you're talking about, just because you mentioned Kriya Shema over here. Brachos, you talked about Shabbos and about Marav. They only touch upon Mincha at all. But here you're throwing it in. You're sticking this Mishnah somewhere over here in Shabbos, and we're saying that with Derech Agav, we're throwing in the Indian of Kriya Shema because Kriya Shema is Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shamayim. And before we even start talking about Hilchos Shabbos, let's remember that first you have to make Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shamayim, and then we can worry about the do's and don'ts and the mitzvahs and the surim of Shabbos, because without being Kabbalas, without being Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shamayim, then you're kind of missing the ikr. That was my 2 cents from this morning. Okay, Mishnah Gimel. Now we're going back into Hilchos Shabbos. Lo yatsa achayit b'machtav salach l'chashrei Hashem shema yishchach yetze. A tailor may not go out with his needle close to nightfall on Friday afternoon, because he might forget that he's carrying it and go into and then carry the needle in the street after Shabbos has begun, which is a chiyuv d'oraisa. Below halav bekumuso, and a sofer cannot go out with his pen, with his kumus, for the same reason. Lo yifle es kelev lo yikra or haneh. One may not remove lice from his clothes or read but by the light of an oil lamp on Shabbos. She might come to tilt the lamp to make a bigger flame, which is a chiyuv d'oraisa. The Emes Amru, in truth they said, Chazan roa heichan hatinok is korim v'aval hu lo yikra. So a teacher may look using the light of a lamp to see where students should read, but he should not read the parsha himself. Let's say it's Friday night learning in the shuls, as many people do nowadays, and they only have candlelight in the shul. Back in the day, no one had electric lighting, so they had candles. So if he's gathering in the shul Friday night with a bunch of kids and they're learning, he should make sure that they're in the right place, but he himself should not read along inside, so he doesn't come to tilt a lamp. Now they're going through in another law. It's totally unrelated to Shabbos. Similarly, a zav may not eat alone with a zava because that might lead to sin. Since we were talking about the Rebbe not reading by the candlelight because he might come to to a nechshos. So we're also throwing this one in, although not related to Shabbos, that a husband and wife who are zav and zava and they're tame, they should not eat together because they might come to do things that husbands and wives usually do, and that is usher when they are zav and zava. Mishnah Dalit. Okay, story time. Element halacha she'amru be'elias Hanani ben Chizkiah ben Gurion kishalu levakru. And there are at one point in time during the time of Hanani ben Chizkiah ben Gurion, which is I guess during the times of the Mishnah, sounds like it. The Chachamim wanted to be Gones Sefer Yecheskel because it seemed like some of his psukim and some of his teachings were antithetical to that of Torah. So the Chacham wanted to put the Sefer into Geniza and take it out of circulation, out of Tanakh, and Hananya went ahead and said, "This is not right." So we may not understand what the connections are between Yechezkel Navi and the Torah, but he's going to work on it. So at that time, he had he was working. He had finished this whole likut of the teachings, and the Chachamim went into his attic to visit with him and to learn these teachings. During that time, you had Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. They went to his attic, and you had a majority of the Chachamim there. More so a Beis Shammai than a Beis Hillel, and Beis Shammai took the opportunity to pass 18 halachos while they were gathered with all the rabbanim or most of the rabbanim in the attic of Hanania. So Nimna v'Rabba Beis Shammai al Beis Hillel, but Beis Shammai had outnumbered Beis Hillel, and the rule was that the majority rules began halacha. So therefore, they took the opportunity to rule on 18 matters according to Beis Shammai, which usually you go according to Beis Hillel. And they issued 18 decrees on that day in their favor. The article has a whole list of the 18, which is beyond today's conversation. So Mishnah Hey, Beis Shammai Omim Ein Shorin Dio. So let's see the first one. So Beis Shammai. The next few Mishnah is all about Beis Shammai's upper hand in these halachas. So Beis Shammai says that before Shabbos, you cannot soak the ingredients used to make ink. If some or dyes in a bowl of water, and we may not soak vetch in a bowl of water. Unless there's enough time for them to become fully soaked while it is still daytime on Friday. According to Beis Shammai, these activities are usher because kalim are usher to do malacha on Shabbos. Now we know that it's people and their animals. We're not. Beis Hillel did not agree. Beis Hillel they do not agree with Beis Shammai, and they do allow your kalim to do malacha on Shabbos, but not animals or people. Mishnah Vav. Beis Shammai omer ein nosnin onin so pished on the soch hataners ela kadeshi sheyavilu mibod yom. Beis Shammai says before Shabbos we may not put bundles of flax into an oven unless there's enough time for them to become heated while still daylight on Friday. Below esat semer the yora ela kadeshi yiklot ayin. And we may not put wool into a dyer's vat unless there's enough time for it to absorb the dye while it's still daytime on Friday. Beis Hillel matir and Beis Hillel matir these activities. even if it's not enough time the process to be completed before Shabbos begins. Beishamai says, "Ein porshim mitzudos chaya v'ofos v'dagim al kadesh yitzudu ibud yom." Before Shabbos, according to Beishamai, you cannot set out traps for wild animals, birds, or fish unless there's enough time for them to catch their prey while it's still daylight on Friday. You gotta set out the traps early in the day. Beishamai says, no, it's not enough time. You can still set up the traps even if there's not enough time for them to catch anything before Shabbos begins. Excuse me. I'm not really sure why Bissell is not worried about Sar Chaim. If the trap is set close to Shabbos and the animal is trapped, then it's going to have Sar Chaim the whole Shabbos until someone picks it up after Shabbos. Not really sure why this Hillel is not worried about that, but regarding Hilchos Shabbos, this seems to be an issue. Mishnah Zayin, Bishamai Omim, Ein Mochin La'ovei Kochavim. Bishamai says you cannot sell an object to a idol worshiper. Ein Toanin Imo, and you cannot help him load an object onto his animal. Ein Man be in a love or lift an object onto him, to place it on his shoulders. Kadesh Yagila Makim, unless there's enough time for him to reach a nearby place before Shabbos begins, and he's not going to be chayiv. He's not going to be over on Esdoraisa from Shabbos. Rishil says no, these are fine. So we are not afraid that people are going to make this mistake. And Mishnah Ches Beishamai Omrim Ein Nostin Oros LeAbdan. Beishamai says we cannot give hides to a non-Jewish tanner for tanning, although Kalim L'Kobes Lo V'Kochavim, or give clothes to a to an idol worshiper, like a laundromat, to be washed. Day unless there's enough time for them to do it to be done while it's still daytime. If the idol worshiper does not have enough time to finish the job before Shabbos, and he does some on Shabbos, then it appears like he had to ask him to work on Shabbos. So the Kulan, Beis Hillel, Matir in HaShamish. But in all of them, in all these cases, if, in the past four Mishnayos, Beis Hillel Matir these activities while the sun is still up on Friday. Mishnah Test. Amar Rebbe Shimon ben Gamliel Noagin Hayu Beis Abba. Shimon ben Gamliel said that it was the practice in his father's house. Shayu Nostin Keli Clay Lavan Lakobis Shlosh Yom Kol Shabbos. He would give white clothes to a laundromat, to a dry cleaners who is an idol worshiper 3 days before Shabbos, so that the laundry could be completed before Shabbos. The Shavin Elu in both these and those cases, both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree. Sheton and Kuros Beis Habav Iguli Hagas. We may place the beams of the olive press on olives and the discs of the wine press on grapes shortly before Shabbos, even though they will continue to press the oil and the juice from the fruits on Shabbos. Because this is only it's the Rabbanan and not as the rice. Two more to go. It's Ein Solim Basar Batsel Beitz Elakadei Shiatsula Mibud Yom. We may not begin to roast meat or an onion or an egg on Friday and I'll leave it on the fire to continue roasting on Shabbos, unless there's enough time for it to be roasted or enough to be edible while it's still daytime. If they don't, then that's a problem. Ain't no past the tanner if Sheikh may not place bread into an oven close to nightfall on Friday afternoon. Likewise, it may not place a round cake or bread onto coals at that time. Ella unless there's enough time for its entire surface to develop a crust. Well, it is still daytime. Lezer says, There needs to be only enough time for the bottom surface to develop a crust with part that's actually touching the surface of the oven. Um, once that happens, there's no longer a concern about someone stirring the coals, even though the rest of the bread is not yet from the crust. And the last Mishnah for today, we may lower the Pesach offering into the oven close to nightfall on Erev Shabbos, even though it will not be sufficiently roasted when Shabbos begins. It will continue to roast on Shabbos. Why? Why is it allowed? Because since you're bringing the current Pesach in a chabura, then there there's going to be enough people who will be watching out to make sure that it's done correctly. And also, and similarly, we may light a fire immediately before Shabbos, even though it only catch on to some of the wood. In the bonfire of the fire chamber in the Beis Hamikdash, we're not concerned that the Kohanim will do um, anything to spread the fire on Shabbos, because they are usually very zealous and careful with Shabbos Isurim. But when lighting a fire outside of the Beis Hamikdash, one's own needs, Kadesh, Tachas, or the Rubam, only light the fire only if there's enough time for it to catch onto most of the wood before Shabbos begins. Otherwise, he might move the sticks and make the fire catch onto it. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Bepachim Kol Shehu. Rabbi Yehuda says that with a fire that was lit with charcoal, it is enough if the fire takes hold of any amount of charcoal before Shabbos begins, and then is then permitted to let the fire spread on Shabbos. He holds that charcoal burns so well that no one has to do any total to it. Thank you for joining us. Tomorrow we will continue. We will continue with Perek Beis. Have a wonderful day, and welcome to Seder Moed.